Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Rhea.
Welcome to Karma's My Bitch, a podcast about love,
Sex,
connection,
abundance,
joy,
purpose,
peace,
and how life isn't simply the stories we tell ourselves. You know, we talk a lot about how as humans things become normal. We were speaking about it in the last episode, right?
Yeah.
And we spoke about it a lot in season 7.
Did we?
I really went over my experience becomes normal thing.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I forgot about that
normal.
statement.
It's like, I was
Yes.
like really, but it's true, right?
It's very true.
The more you do something, the more it's rewiring, it's rewriting, it's all the things that people talk about in fancy ways. It's effectively, if you break a habit or break a thought pattern or break anything, eventually it becomes normal.
Yes.
And so where in my karma, it was a horror show for me to write even like a modicum of how I was feeling. I mean, I remember there was this one time at university, I don't know if I told you this, I'm pretty sure I've told you this before, where there was this guy that we clearly were into each other.
Was
right?
this the key story?
No,
Okay.
the key story is another one. So many of these horrific stories. We were clearly into each other, right? And he came into, we lived in the same, like, I don't know, block or whatever. And he came into my room.
Okay.
And we were lying together. Nothing was happening, just lying together. Yeah. And it was clear.
As co-eds tend to do sometimes.
And it was clear that
out.
we both wanted the same thing. I couldn't, and he kept saying, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
I mean, the opening.
Honestly,
the opening.
I couldn't form the words. I stayed mute. I couldn't even speak. And then I remember 2 days later, like, again, I think I got up the courage to like kind of maybe look suggestively. And for me, that was like a horror. It was so hard, so fucking hard to do anything, right? Like that's why none of our relationships ever got off the ground, because I literally was so indifferent, like on the surface
you
to
appeared.
anything.
You were not.
Oh my God. I was like, it wasn't even like swirling waves inside. And I remember like during my karmic experience, my karmic undoing, I'd be like messaging someone, like maybe I'd put in a feeling. And I remember once I wrote the most benign message, and we've definitely referenced this before, and I was like having an anxiety attack and like crying in the car, and I called you and I was like, I did it. I said my feelings. I read it back now. It's not even a feeling. It's just like more of an inclination. But obviously the more I did it and the more I did it and the more I did it, now it's just so fucking normal for me just to say how I feel. If I know I want to say it and I know what I want to say, I will have no problems doing it. But it took me so long to do that. And obviously now and again we have our wobbles, and like I start thinking outside of myself. It's like, how will they act? But as we know from a previous episode about relationships, that's detachment. No outcome or expectation is I've got to do this. I've got to communicate in this way because I need it for myself, right? Yeah. And that's also what allows for intimacy, because you're actually being yourself and you're allowing someone else to respond to you rather than to who you think they want you to be, right? But it took me forever to get there. But now it's normal.
Feels like forever, but maybe like 3 years.
But in the scheme of things, it's nothing, right? When I look at the scheme of my life, my desires, what I want from my world, right? The idea that I can communicate with honesty, well, as much as I can be honest with myself and then communicate that out. We all think we know our truth, right? But it's our truth in the moment.
Yes,
and
that's very true.
At least I'm able to communicate that truth. Whether or not that truth shifts as my learning shifts, or as I see more things, and at least without an ego, you're humble enough to accept that you can change your mind, because with new information, things change, things shift, and that's normal.
You may not know everything.
100%. Yeah. But when I look at that, like newly learned communication style, which now feels more normal to me, I think, well, that's only the tip of the iceberg of what I actually want. That's not enough.
Okay.
I don't just want to be able to communicate normally. I want to have huge conversations normally. I want to be able to dig into that and see where it could lead. You know, there's this constant desire of wanting more. And we've taught a lot that that's growth and evolution, right? Yeah. What you call growth and evolution, I call wanting more. And that's amazing. Yeah. But sometimes I find that desire, that drive for wanting more, especially for someone like me who is bored a lot, who is, who really, like, I thrive on the excitement. I thrive on the energy, the pushing of the energy, right? Like I thrive on
the challenge.
That. Yeah. Oh, I need something to push back on all the time. My best words, my best voices, my best thoughts are always when I'm pushing back against someone else. Yeah. It ends up actually sometimes like it can overwhelm us. that is, I think, what led to those 2.5 months, just that overwhelm. As we discussed also in a previous episode, it's just, I was overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue. Sometimes wanting more becomes a bit more of a distraction or interferes with our fate.
Yeah.
And that's really annoying because then you go through this whole process, your karmic undoing bullshit, the whole ego thing and the fear thing, and you work so hard and you get through it that you're like, how can wanting more be that lame? Or how can it really do me any harm? And so I don't want to say, well, it's harmful, but it's not necessarily, it's not harmful at all. Like, you need the wanting more because you need
the spirit.
You need the spirit, but you also need the trajectory, right? You need to be able to project a bit, but you also need a sense, not necessarily to know, but you also need a sense of destination, even if it's not an end, but you kind of need some direction. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So then how do you do it? How do you create? Because wanting more is great. We need that gas. We need that spirit. We need the destiny. We need all of the things, right? Yeah. And actually, great, I took myself off to stop myself imploding. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I just got a tune up. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to change when I get back on it. The second I got back on it, I was that same person again, wanting more, ready for it.
Well, you're never the same person.
No. But those same drive was still there. Mm-hmm. So how do you...
Actually, it's probably extra. The drive is there, but remember, once you've had these pit stops, you actually get a bit more. You get more of a boost.
Okay, well, you say remember, I don't know this, go on.
No, this is how it's going to be because you're referring to something that is in future, right?
Oh, fine.
Because you're referring to the past.
Yes, sorry.
So I'm like, no, you're not the same person. No. You can't possibly be the same person.
Yeah.
So coming out of it can feel a bit slow. Again, coming out of the pit stop, you got to kind of rev your engine, you got to get going. But once you catch up and you're in the race, you'll get going again. It just takes a bit of momentum, right?
And how long does that often take?
It can take a few weeks to a couple months, depending on how long you've taken yourself out.
So if you took yourself out for 2.5 months?
It's just a matter of weeks.
Okay.
If that.
Like a day?
Fuck off. No, it's going to be a couple weeks. This has been nice. It's been lovely. I've gotten a lot out of it, but I'm really finished. You just know when you're done. And it's not from that bored place of like, oh, I need some excitement. It's like, wait, I'm kind of feeling like I'm ready for more.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But then how do you create that more? Because obviously we just had this whole thing about time collapsing and we don't have to wait anymore. And actually I've had a question about that since we've discussed it.
Okay.
Is it like time's a bit of an elastic band? So like when time slows, then it catches up. Do you have to make it up somewhere else?
No.
Okay,
and
fine.
It's not like an elastic band.
Okay, fine.
No.
That was just my question. So time collapsing, it doesn't then stretch to even it out?
No.
Fine.
No.
But how does that work then? Wanting more, being impatient, wanting to go, whilst also, and time, knowing that time can collapse and we don't have to wait.
Yeah.
But also the whole thing we just discussed, which was like imploding and all the other stuff. How does that all work together?
Yeah, this all sounds so fucking messy. I'm like, well, welcome to the Age of Harmony. Okay. I remember the Age of Harmony from like some previous season last night. I was like, oh, I could say something other than 5D.
Oh, the Age of Harmony. Well done. Yeah. Okay, so welcome to... So that's like, what that is.
Found its way
This
through.
Is the messy chaos.
It's not chaos, but it is the messiness of having the limitless possibilities.
Okay.
Yeah? Where it's like, wow, but it could be this, and then it could look like this, and then maybe I'm going to go do this, and, it could just make you feel all over the place. And then for some who want or who have always operated, especially in their karmic reality, kind of control freaks, right? Or always being no one in this room.
No one specific.
No, not going to name names. Where perhaps that they wanted to be able to anticipate or have some level of certainty, that's going to be really uncomfortable, right? And just like you had to kind of get your footing when you're out of your karma, but not quite in the Age of Harmony or in quote unquote 5D, it's gonna take time to kind of be able to find that. Well, that was kind of the previous episode, find that groove, right? The ability to move on constantly moving ground. Yeah. Right? Without losing your balance.
Yeah. Until it becomes normal.
Exactly. But it's never going to feel normal because once you're really in it, the change is going to be constant. Okay. So it's going to be one thing after another. And then you just get used to the momentum is what you get accustomed to.
That sounds so great.
Yeah.
But I like movement.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily like change.
I hate change.
And that's what's going to be the challenge.
How do you like one and not like the others? Welcome to my brain.
Again, you know why? It's because of the certainty bit. I like movement because I know what I'm doing. Or I like movement when it's moving me towards the things I want.
Yes.
And it's moving me towards everything that I can envision and see and stuff, right? I don't like all this movement if it's hurtling me towards the unknown.
Yes.
Okay? That's the difference.
But you say that. I did a thing on TikTok yesterday when it's like, imagine a sea, imagine the sands, imagine this, imagine that. And according to the psychological test, I'm actually quite comfortable with uncertainty.
Okay, cool. And that's why most of those TikTok things are total rubbish. But okay, well, I'll just go with that. If that kind of got you through and assured you that
to be
you were
fair,
okay,
I am a lot more than I was. So I was like, maybe it's relative.
You know what? I'm not going to rob you of all of your self-improvement, Rhea. It is fantastic. It's awesome. You just run with it.
Okay, so but how do we find this like kind of natural unfolding, perfect timing stuff that like is what I imagined and what I thought it would be?
All the hardwiring that we acquired and that we developed while we were in our karma, especially around the how and the when. How is this going to happen? I need to know. Yeah. And when is this going to happen? Two things which you knew you were very attached to. Again, that's why we had to talk about detachment and everything. And that's why
and time.
And that's why often, as you and I were discussing before we hit the record button, which was, you know, that is why coaching has become such a popular concept, because people are really needing the hand holding at the moment. They need to feel sure that they're going to be okay in what appears to be very deep water. You have to promise me I'm not going to drown. And when you really look at it, you're like, that's not even a meter deep.
It's really not.
You know,
but in the scheme of things, no one can promise you're not going to drown. And talking about guidance for the past couple of episodes as well. Why are we wrapping everything up? But I'll do it.
Because it's final episodes.
Yeah. Like when we talk about guidance so much, how many times did guidance tell me I wasn't going to drown and then I drowned? Or how many times did you know, we hope that...
But you didn't drown because you didn't die.
No, exactly. But what I'm saying is all fucking relative. Like no one can tell you what's going to happen next.
No.
Apart from you.
And you may not even know. You just got to be okay with not knowing.
No one can tell you you're going to be safe.
And then just jumping
No one can tell you it's all going to be okay. No one can. And if they say that they can, then they're not... They're looking at it either from such an expanded perspective, because eventually everyone's okay. In some way or another. You always find peace at the end of the journey.
It always happens for a reason.
You know, no, but like...
find the reason.
Like, I hate to be Debbie Downer or just like taking your role for a second here.
Fuck off.
But, you know, at the end of the day, if you don't make it, you're at peace. It's some way, somehow, that everything finds a natural ending of peace. Mm-hmm. So yes, no one's going to lie to you if they say you'll be okay, but no one can ever tell you how that's going to look like. You can't fashion it. You can't put people into boxes. You can't do any of that.
No. And you also can't come from it. And part of the reason why this is also, it doesn't work, is because everyone's going to be coming at it from a very old school idea of how life should look, how life would look. Everything is sort of, at some point, an amalgamation of what the imagination has put forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, or what the limited mind has somehow created.
And that's my issue, because I feel my imagination is so huge, and then my limited mind comes along and then says, well, this is how it should look like.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, I've limited myself already.
Yeah. And so what happens is you start vacillating between the really, really huge, ginormous picture, which can't possibly fit into a human reality, right? Because you got to contend with that. And then the very, very narrow picture, which is like maybe a millimeter really of the entire picture. So you keep going back and forth from super wide to super narrow. And somewhere the actual reality falls, not even in the middle, somewhere in the larger picture, but maybe not as big. But you just don't know. And so you're just ping-ponging. And that gets really frustrating.
And also,
right?
depending on how much you traverse your fate, you probably could fill the whole larger picture, just not in the way that you expect.
Right. I'm talking about like massive. And we did talk about how in a previous episode, you need imagination. Because
100%.
If you can't write your fate without some level of imagination.
And also a lot of the time we've been discussing how actually like a big part of this, 5D harmony thing is it is dreams to reality. It is fantasy to reality. And you've used those words specifically.
Absolutely. It
is.
So
you need the fantasy and the dreams and all that stuff. But the issue that we have is that when we have the fantasy and the dreams, we expect them to look exactly like that in reality. Yeah. When actually it's maybe like the sense of the fantasy or the dreams, or the outcomes of the fantasy and the dreams.
Or
the feeling, or the kind of larger container of them.
Yes,
but we can never plan the minutiae. No. We're just not that smart.
Well, also, things are just possible in other ways. But we get attached to the fact that it has to unfold this very specific way because, either social media or any kind of media has laid forth the example of what the perfect holiday looks like, what the perfect stay looks like, what the perfect person or partner looks like, and the perfect home.
Let me tell you, all of them are flawed. The perfect
all
partner
flawed.
is super fucking flawed. The perfect holiday is super flawed. Everything's flawed.
Right, but
They're always perfect for us.
Precisely. And we're having to contend with that. And that's part of our karmic undoing. And that is part of that karmic hardwiring that you talked about in terms of shifting out of that. And that is why the ego is so necessary to kill. Yeah. Because it holds on to those images the longest, right?
And sometimes we need to be humbled. And I have to say, I think that's the one thing that stuck with me for a little bit after those 2.5 months is I was humbled. Mm-hmm. I was humbled by how actually, whilst I could see what was coming, mm-hmm. it could only come by following my heart. Mm. And it could only come if I didn't hold on to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the bit I really struggled with, because it's a very strange feeling to see something, but have no idea how you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. So your mind fills in all the dots, especially someone like me with a mental purpose. I created every stepping stone in my head. So when the first one that I'd created in my head didn't come, it was like all the rest fell. Yeah. When actually that first stepping stone wasn't the truth. It was the end that was the truth. Mm-hmm. And how I was going to get there remained to be seen. Yeah. And I mean seen as in from my mind's eye and from my eyes. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Which is what I guess when you've said clarity 3 times, and I agree with you, is that that's, I think, the thing, right? Is that I can have clarity on where I'm going. Mm-hmm. And I can have clarity on, I can't see maybe the faces, they're all a bit blurry. I can see bits, I can see knowings, I can see feelings, mm-hmm. but I can't see how I'm going to get there. Mm-hmm. And to really traverse my fate, I've just got to work hard at following my heart. And I use all those words very specifically.
Yes.
Work hard at following my heart. Yeah. And that you'll get there.
You will get there. And sometimes it could seem perhaps a bit boring. Because what happens as well is, as you had alluded to earlier, we can swing between boredom and impatience when we're in our fate, right? So sometimes, like you had said, that 2.5 months, that sort of pit stop you made, it was from on the outside looking in,
was that a joy to be around?
You were easy to be around because you were at peace. It was just, you were just you without a lot of distraction.
And then afterwards?
You're you in your different way, and that's awesome too.
So American.
So American.
You're like, you're awesome in all your annoyingness.
Is that American?
So is the goal,
or is that California?
Is the goal to basically be at that peace, but also be able to manage all the shit that comes, all the wellness? Pretty much.
Okay. And that's why we discuss the importance of this sort of natural and organic development that comes. And I don't mean just in that karmic undoing. I just mean in everything that gets you into this age of harmony with yourself. When you talked about clarity and being able to see effectively what you might term your destination.
Yeah. Or the next destination.
Next destination. It's not final destination, okay? Yeah.
We can all see our final destination. But before that.
Who's taking the role of Debbie Downer now? So, not me. But you could see a destination in your fate, right? And you got that sense. But then you got this kind of sense of overwhelm. And then you needed to kind of control how you were going to get there. Because then at least then you thought, well, if I can control and if I know the next steps, then I can anticipate everything. Yeah,
but at the same time, I can control. If I do control and anticipate everything, there's no fun, there's no life anymore.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, you're actually not in divine consciousness.
I was just at war with myself.
When you're at war with yourself, the divine, there's no space, right? When we talk about clarity, it's just being able to see with a lot of ease and joy what lies ahead of you. And that wasn't ease and joy. That was stress. That was stress and insecurity. How am I going to make it? Because then because this is the interesting thing to tie in another episode is I'm responsible for getting there. It wasn't just, oh my God, how am I going to get there? And that sheer excitement of that would be so great. It's the holy fuck, I am responsible for creating that. And you mean well. Here I am going to Americanize you into my enthusiasm. And you meant well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what people also have to remember is that they want to be able to fulfill that. It's our divine mission is to make this shit happen. Yeah. So you bring also that level of care But we can also care so much.
But then it effectively became a self-sabotage because I feel so responsible for this. If I cannot make it happen, I will have failed.
Yes.
So better that none of it exists.
Yeah.
And I literally set out to prove that I was wrong, whilst also battling with the fact that I knew on some level I was right.
Yeah.
And so I created a war within myself.
Yeah.
So whilst I was at peace in some ways because I gave up fighting for a bit, so I could actually sort it out internally and come out as one.
Exactly.
Because I couldn't fight anymore. Those 2 months, I was piecing back together all the little bits that caused me to just split and become a bit jaggedy. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain that any other way.
Yeah. Even when you're a fully conscious being, there can still be struggles, and those struggles still mirror our growth and evolution, especially in these early years of trying to figure out how to live from our fate. It's like, wow, okay, I mean, in our karma, everything is quite laid out in that destiny kind of way, right? There's a goal, and there's another goal to be met, and then there's these possibilities, and I don't know, where does it all go?
Yeah.
Where do I go with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really fair, and I think that's why I really did enjoy trying to learn about these. When I was channeling these outlines in these episodes, it was a really interesting perspective to gain around fate. And they're not landmines or pitfalls. It's just trying to understand, and this is part of that whole, when people talk about the idea of resurrection or reanimation, we are ascending while in body, and that's what this means. We are trying to figure out how can we exist in this age of harmony, as in how do we create it? And we co-create it by doing it internally first and ascending into that higher consciousness while still alive. In order to be able to physically ascend in higher consciousness and get our bodies there too, it's having to rewire all of this. What we're effectively looking for then in this kind of messiness of our fate, and what feels messy or a bit overwhelming, is we're looking for this convergence. The one thing that we can have when it comes to true clarity within our fate is that there's the one truth, right? That everything's divine.
Yeah.
And everything is of the divine, etc., etc. That's not the same as having divine consciousness, which is you are the divine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but imagine if you have that and you understand the truth fully.
Which is that you are the divine and everything's from the divine.
You are part of everything, yeah? At some point on your path in your fate, the one truth somehow then converges somewhere along that fate when you hit it. As in, when you realize this truth and you are realizing your fate, that point of convergence is where everything actually becomes possible. So if you can imagine that your fate was created from a place of God consciousness, as in you created and wrote your fate before you incarnated, right? So that was before all your karmic shit, before your ego development.
And you had like the biggest mind ever, right? So you went, it's like
the biggest mind, the biggest knowing, the biggest awareness.
Yeah.
Also with the you just have to have some humor about it, the enthusiasm to think, well, this is going to be interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're not experiencing it yet, so you're a bit detached from it. It's like going on a roller coaster and knowing that you're going to have the drop, but actually not experiencing the drop until you're on the roller coaster.
Precisely. Yeah. I'm not going to know what this physically feels like.
Yeah.
But I do know
in concept, it'll be okay.
Yeah, of course. It's always going to be okay because I've incarnated enough times. I have enough life experience that I'm going to walk in and I know that as much as it's going to suck, I'll have signed on for all of it and I'll just learn and grow.
Yeah. And at the same time, especially at this time, we're like, you know what? I'm going to get to do something that I haven't been able to do for millennia. Which
or like
is
ever.
Where I can actually really take advantage of this human life in a way that I've never been able to do before because I've always just been mired in my shit.
Yeah.
This time I can be me, this God consciousness person, in body.
Yes.
So the world will become my playground.
Yes.
So it's worth it.
And maybe we get hit over the head a few times, maybe more, because
it's never what we expected.
It's not fully what you expected. Your higher self always knows, though. And your soul anticipates.
But also, as we said, in karma, when you've got the how and the when, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. So the more and more you're not seeing the how and you're feeling that the when is like a moving goalpost, the more the how and the when become never. So you're also contending with that.
Yeah. And you also understand that the lesson isn't something that you can just intellectually get. You have to allow yourself to fully experience in order to come into consciousness.
You have to give yourself permission to learn it, which effectively in my case, was always giving myself permission to believe in myself and to believe myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's effectively what we do over and over again to come out of separation.
Mm-hmm.
I was right all along.
So when you have divested yourself of all of that, all that story, and you get to a point where you are in your fullest fate, or you're just entering into what will become your fullest fate. So you're traversing the beginning stages.
Yeah.
At some point along that journey, all of that awareness, so the full body consciousness that allows you to transcend your karma, and the higher consciousness that allows you to live from your fate, somewhere along those lines, the more you experience, capital M more, the more you can gather what we would call divine awareness, which is the one truth, right? And that's where your higher consciousness comes in, which is all is of the divine.
Yeah, which is effectively what it is to be in higher consciousness as well. But I guess you just get it in a visceral way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just a much more profound,
rather than
I can
theoretical.
See it. Yeah, exactly.
Rather than, of the divine choice, you almost have to remind yourself of it. Mm-hmm. It just is. It's just different because, as we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, experience becomes normal. Mm-hmm. In that way, the more it happens, the more it just is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something that you have to make into a habit or a memory or a reminder or anything. It just is.
It just is.
Yeah.
And so at some point, though, as we've discussed this season, that divine awareness can become, not necessarily, but it can become divine consciousness. Not only is everything of the divine, and part of the divine, I am the divine, which means that I am connected to all.
And I'm fucking powerful.
Yeah. And I have all the power of the divine as a result. So what we're discussing...
I mean, that sounds really out there, all of it, to anyone who hasn't experienced it already.
Yeah, because I was sort of thinking, even to me at first, I thought, okay, well, imagine if you're just really not a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not like the Age of Harmony is a club for people who only have divine consciousness.
No,
That's
I mean,
bullshit.
more people are in 5D that probably aren't spiritual than are. Let's be honest at this stage.
I mean, let's just be honest. There aren't a lot of people who are even there.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just still hoping for full-bodied consciousness, right? So when we're talking about this, and I think, all right, if we're going to introduce such an advanced notion, then we're going to have to simplify it and also see how it applies to everyone or as many people as possible, because otherwise then I'm not going to waste my breath.
Yeah, agreed. So tell me.
It's because what we're effectively trying to share with people is that, well, not only is life post-karma one worth chasing, one worth pursuing, one worth really going through this process for, and it's not trying to dangle this carrot either, but it's once you get there, you have to understand that there's a whole new learning that comes with it. And that learning takes some time, but it is very possible, as you can attest to. And one that takes about half the time as your karmic undoing can. But you can actually get there faster if you really understand that you're heading for a life that is going to be so different from the one you know. And the sooner you can get on board with that, the sooner you can accept that. And that was kind of your struggle, frankly, was but I can't leave my old world behind. I can't leave my friends behind. I can't, right?
Which again was such bullshit, because it's not like I didn't learn that from my karmic undoing process. The ones that matter stay. You get to keep all the bits you like and you just lose the bits you don't. I mean, it just, why I couldn't I should have maybe just listened to an old podcast about karma to remind myself what was going to happen next, because it's true. Even in my karma, I was just so worried about ending stuff. And the only things that ended were the bits I didn't like. It was just such a waste of fucking time.
I mean, the amount of time spent listening to you talk about your fear of endings, Rhea. No offense. I mean,
I know, I'm rolling my eyes with you, because I'm just like, at the end of the day, all I lost were the things I didn't like.
I can't handle endings. I'm not good with endings. I just don't like endings. And I was like, you're going to
have to get on board, bitch.
You're going to have to try. Just try. And I would just keep my mouth shut and be like, yeah, I know. It's not easy. It's just not easy. It's just really challenging.
I mean, listen, you're a huge fan of endings. So, we're just quite different. But at the same time, all the things, I'd imagine I'd lose the whole friendship rather than just the toxic bits. It was just ridiculous in hindsight, because actually I got exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But when you can get to that point, so
maybe what I just said will help.
I really hope that you could provide the cautionary tale of if you're holding on, it's because of this one thing you're afraid of losing.
Yeah.
It's going to take you longer.
And you don't lose it anyway.
And it's just a fact that if it's really belongs to you, it will not go.
Doesn't.
Or it could just transform.
Exactly. Into something way better.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're holding on to the one thing or that
And
thing,
if you lose it, you were going to lose it anyway. And I hate to say that, but you were.
Yeah. Oh, that's very true. I really can't believe you're saying all this. I'm like so proud of like 2023, right? Without, not to sound patronizing at all. I'm
No.
just like, oh, thank God we've come through the other end.
No, but at the end of the day, it's also because I'm being serious. And I've said this, I know I've said this in previous podcasts when I was talking about karma. I know I said it. I was terrified of losing everything and like laying waste to my life. When actually all I did was, like a very skilled surgeon, pluck the bits out that were causing me the issues. It was a very different process.
Yeah.
It was much more delicate, much smarter than what I imagined, which was just like a wrecking ball.
So what happens is that when you are engaged in your fate, irrespective of all of these potential outcomes, right, that and these pitfalls that you're wired to anticipate, if you're asking yourself to live outside the bounds of what you have been socialized to do, it's not going to be simple. Even when you are in higher consciousness, you're going to still have to stretch yourself.
Yeah.
Because it won't come naturally.
You've got to release your mind.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's just releasing your mind, because we've been everything, and I've said this, I know, in previous episodes recently, but everything we do, act, behave, we've been socialized to do. Mm-hmm. From something as simple as sitting on a table, eating with a knife and fork. Everything from how we love, how we live, what we look like, what's beauty, what's not
how we
beauty,
view the
what's
world.
smart. Everything is created by us.
Yeah.
Which means everything is up for grabs. Mm-hmm. None of it is real. We can literally create whatever we desire because it was already created anyway. And by believing it, we put our energy into it and we kept keeping it alive.
Yeah.
We put our energy into something else that we do actually want. We keep that alive instead. Does that make sense? I mean, it probably does to you and probably no one else.
Yeah. Well, you're effectively just talking about life force.
So how do we get to this kind of way of life where we are cross-sectioning the truth with the truth, and we just see that everything's a fucking construct and we can create everything, and wanting more is not the issue at all, but it's about being able to hold our power. Actually, I don't know why wanting more is part of this, to be honest. But
well, wanting more is part of the conversation is because when things get really messy, it can make things messy, and then it can get confusing, and then we shut down.
Which is why then we need the clarity to bring ourselves back out.
Precisely.
But it's okay because it's a part of it, just like anything else.
It is, and it's a process. And once you've worked it out once, you usually won't repeat, right? Because you'll recognize the signs, right?
Yeah.
The warning signs of like,
I'm spreading myself a bit too thin here.
Yeah.
I'm asking a bit too much of myself right now.
Yeah.
I'm not allowing things to naturally unfold. Instead, I'm trying to force things when they aren't ready.
Precisely.
And in the end, I'm going to implode.
Yeah.
Unless I just actually create some other side joys.
Yeah. And so maybe it's not even about using our energy to create at the moment. It could just be, instead of taking ourselves out, it could very well, I'm going to go take myself out for an afternoon.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't have to be
I'm
so
just going to do a
dramatic.
little research.
I'm just going to go to the cinema and
Yeah.
not work today.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as that,
Yeah.
because then I free my mind.
Yeah, and I stop the cycle before it even starts.
Right. I take the stress out of my emotional body.
Yeah.
So I give room for my spiritual body just to kind of relax.
Yeah.
And then the rest starts to come together. That is how we know we're in sort of flow plus, right? Because what I'm discussing in terms of this sort of fate line, divine truth, awareness and consciousness convergence is really like flow plus.
Fine.
And so you're not having to actively work at anything necessarily, but you're just having to remember a few things. The first one is like your true commitment to your purpose, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens is sometimes when we take ourselves out or things get messy, when we lose sense of a lot of things, purpose is going to get you back faster than anything else, faster than relationship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Because otherwise we end up conflating that relationship.
Yeah, that the relationship becomes our purpose. And
Yeah.
that's just all a waste of fucking time.
So, and that comes from like making sure that your priorities are the purpose versus the relationship. It doesn't mean that relationships come second, but it's making sure that the purpose doesn't fall below.
Well, it's just I am a happier person and I am better in a relationship when I'm connected to my purpose. So everything benefits when I'm connected to my purpose.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like. I spent many years in my karma, but now I know when I am in my purpose and I'm happy and I'm doing what I love, and I get to share that with someone else at the end of the day. And that's so much better.
And then the final piece, giving yourself over to your fate, so that way you could take full command of it. Isn't that interesting? Do you understand that? Because in that moment,
No, I
at first
don't.
I didn't.
I guess it's choosing it. Because actually, if you can understand that fate effectively is what facilitates everything, right? When you look at the most famous of people, the most successful of people, to the person around the corner from you, right? It's effectively, what is the difference between them? Is how much are they living in their fate? How much of their fate have they traversed? That is it, right? I'm not saying we all have the potential to be Elon Musk, but I'm saying we all have the potential to be as expanded and as great as we can be as ourselves.
Yeah.
Our fate is what facilitates everything. It what allows us to have this podcast. It's what allows us to have the books. It's what allows me to sing, to share, to write, to love, to meet. All the things I do. And people think it's manifestation, as we've discussed in previous episodes. People think it's secret. People think it's all these stories and things that we've told ourselves. It's affirmations. It's none of that. It's you choosing your fate and choosing to live by it. And part of that, when you're in your karma, is choosing your destiny and choosing to live by that, to get into your fate, right? It's like checking in the airport, booking the ticket. All the stuff you do before you get on the plane and before you land at the other side, that's still part of the holiday, right? It's still part of the journey. But that's fate, to get on that and to live that and to traverse it. And the only thing is, when we talk about how fast I did it, and maybe that's the collapsing time bit, is that I just knew where I was going. And I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know anything. I just knew I had to get on that line. I had to get there. And that's what I pushed for. So being able to, when you're there, be like, okay, I am here now. All these different lines, all these different weaves, all these different tapestries, all these different possibilities that are in front of me. I choose it fully so that I can traverse it fully. So that I can take everything it has to offer and experience it. And in doing so, I allow myself to not only feel my potential, but have that potential be limitless.
Thank you for listening. For more information, articles, and inspiration, find us at karmasmybitch.com and at karmasmybitch.insta.
And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.